Hey class, and welcome to week 5 of History of Psych. As always, here's kind of my weekly rundown of important announcements and topics I would like you guys to focus on this week. So my checklist for the week, I hope you guys all survived exam number 1. If you have any questions about the exam, please let me know. I'm happy to talk with you about any questions, any concerns that you possibly have. I'm happy to help. So as we look forward to week 5, things that I would expect you guys to do. I would really appreciate if you guys could read chapter 4 in your textbook, as well as my slides that I created for the chapter. You'll have 2 videos that I have posted, one over Wilhelm Wundt and one over Dr. Mesmer. I also posted another video that's sort of a trailer. You guys will kind of notice that I will post trailers to movies that are kind of popular movies that you would see in the movie theaters, covering people that we will cover in this course. You're not going to be tested over these trailers, but whenever I do find a trailer for a movie that goes over a topic for the week, I always post it for you guys just so you can see what it's about. And if it's something that you are interested in, you can definitely watch the movie on Mesmer. It's available on YouTube and it's free in your free time. After you read the chapter and watch the 2 videos, there, as always, we have a chapter 4 quiz and your social bookmark number 3. Make sure that you are choosing topics from chapter 4 to write your bookmarks on. So I suggest looking at your key terms, looking at the slides, but don't tag your actual textbook. That seems to be a common issue that I keep seeing. So these should be outside sources. Doing simply a Google search is going to be how you can get this information to create your 3rd bookmark for the course. All right, so when we look at important topics, let's keep in mind the time period. So this chapter really focuses on the 1800s in Europe and the United States. You will kind of see the chapter kind of go back and forth between Germany and what American psychologists learned from Germany. So the majority of this chapter will take place in the 1800s. As you've kind of noticed as well, the chapter and this textbook really focuses on the 4 types of knowledge. So scientific knowledge, popular beliefs, values, and legal knowledge. This will be the first time where there's really a topic that kind of bridges a couple gaps. And that topic is phrenology. So phrenology bridges the gap between scientific knowledge and popular beliefs. Luckily, I guess you could say, phrenology is no longer part of kind of psychology as a discipline, but it's still kind of interesting to know, and it's always going to be in textbooks when we look at the history of psychology across disciplines. So phrenology in and of itself would be, you would go to a doctor who specialized in phrenology. They would touch your head, see if you had any bumps, any bruises, any sort of misshapenness, and then based on where that shape was, they would look at like a model of a head. So there is a picture on this slide of like a phrenology head. So let's say you had kind of like a bump in your top right cortex of your brain on your skull. That could mean that you have issues with moral judgment. So people truly believe this. People would see Dr. Gall, who created phrenology, and believe that based on like the size, the shape of your head could lead to different kind of mental outcomes. But thankfully, around 1911, phrenology kind of went out of style. Next big topic of the chapter is going to be early measurements in psychology. So these measurements were mostly on memory. Another important topic and kind of a turning point for the field was the personal equation studies. These studies were kind of found a little bit by accident and by astronomers. So what started in England is astronomers started looking at the differences between observers and human error when mapping stars and calculating time. This led to the concept of reaction times. And then really they started to realize that your reaction time was kind of an individual difference. And so this really started to look at differences in people and their intellectual and mental capacities. After we look at measurements in psychology, we dive into kind of the first lab in psychology. You guys probably know that the first lab in psychology was in Germany. But why do you think it was in Germany? Other than Wilhelm Wundt being there and being the person to create it, why was Germany seen as like the favorable social climate place for this to happen? A couple reasons. One, the infrastructure of Germany at the time. So at the time when Wundt started his lab, Germany wasn't just kind of one country. It was kind of a collection of different countries that were all kind of competing against each other in many areas, including the arts, education, and science. So you would always have people who were trying to be kind of the best state, in a sense, in the conglomerate that was Germany at the time. There was also a major kind of education reform across German universities. So students and professors had a greater academic freedom, which stimulated new studies, new fields of thought, new things that they could study. The government really wasn't forcing them to study one thing or another. They could really focus on anything that interests them. And at the time, Germany was one of the most economically advanced countries in the world. So universities had more funding for studies. Universities were larger, there was more professors, more funds available for them to study. All right, so as I have mentioned a couple times, Wilhelm Wundt is always going to be considered the father of psychology. He created his first lab in Leipzig, Germany in 1879, and the Institute for Experimental Psychology in 1894. In and of itself, he created a new way to study and research psychology that had never been done before. But you really have to kind of stop and think, do you know any of his theories? Are we still teaching his theories in classes now? Really, the answer is no. We don't study his theories anymore. They were easily kind of discredited not very far after he started his work, but he's still significant for many, many reasons. Like I said, he is the founder of the first experimental psychology lab. He helped psychology in general in gaining confidence and becoming an independent discipline. At the time, there really wasn't a psychology department. There were philosophy departments, and you might have a psychology course as part of your philosophy instruction. But after the work of Wundt, psychology and psychology labs became more of a thing. Wundt helped train hundreds of aspiring individuals to further develop psychology around the world. I think it's 33 Americans worked on their doctoral degrees under Wundt in his lab in Leipzig and brought that work back to the United States. Most of these 33 became founding members of the APA, or the American Psychological Association. But do keep in mind, most of his theories were short-lived, and none of his theoretical views have stood the test of time, but his impact will continue. Finally, our chapter does cover kind of the start of the APA, or the American Psychological Association. As you may know, the APA is a very large institute that is still around today. It was founded in 1892 at the University of Pennsylvania. At the time, it was a group that really didn't have a lot of power, but it definitely has changed throughout time. So I want you to kind of focus in on how did the APA start? Why was it started? And if you can, kind of compare and contrast how that looks today. And finally, my psychologist spotlight is on Dr. Franz Mesmer. Again, another German doctor. The reason that we still talk about Dr. Mesmer is not necessarily for his psychology, but he is definitely somebody who was kind of the founder of mesmerism, or what is considered modern day hypnosis. Important things to kind of think about for him is going to be, while Wundt focused on the psychological and scientific knowledge, Mesmer is more in like the popular beliefs category. Mesmerism and hypnosis were definitely huge trends. People believed in them. People would seek out Dr. Mesmer in order to kind of cure illnesses. So I really want you guys to kind of stop and compare and contrast the scientific knowledge that is Wundt and the popular beliefs that is Dr. Mesmer. Okay, and as always, if you guys have any questions, any concerns, anything at all, please let me know. I am happy to help. Have a good week.